It's Thursday, August 7th. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Na Hyun-kyung. Now, these are the stories we're following at this hour. President Park Geun-hye continues with her agenda of realizing a peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. A special presidential committee convenes for the first time since being formed last month. Seoul and Washington may be nearing an agreement on rescheduling U.S. wartime operational control over the South Korean military. And efforts to contain the deadly Ebola virus in West Africa continues as the death toll climbs to 932. Our top story this afternoon, a special reunification committee was created under the presidential office last month. The 50 committee members held a meeting, the very first of its kind, on this Thursday, presided over by President Park Geun-hye. Our Myung-kil starts us off.
The Park Geun-hye administration has placed a priority on economic reform in recent weeks, but has also shifted its focus back toward a unification drive with North Korea, an initiative that was overshadowed by April's ferry tragedy and the escalation of provocations out of North Korea. President Park ordered members of a 50-member special committee to draw up measures to build up infrastructure in North Korea and improve lives of North Koreans as the first steps to prepare for reunification. The committee, designed to conduct research on possible unification of the two Koreas and arouse greater public interest in the matter, was launched last month. President Park has said that a reunification of the two Koreas will be an economic bonanza for the peninsula and neighboring countries. During a speech in Dresden, Germany in March, she called for bolstering cross-border exchanges as a first step toward building trust between the rival Koreas and laying the groundwork for unification. The committee will explore ways to make that happen. It is composed of 30 experts from the private sector, 2 National Assembly representatives, 11 government officials, and 6 heads of state-run research institutes. The two Koreas have been divided for more than 6 decades, following the 1950 to 1953 Korean War, which ended in a ceasefire, not a peace treaty. Myung-kil, ARIRANG News.
North Korea seems to be expanding its nuclear program at its Yongbyon nuclear site, and very actively too. The U.S.-based Institute for Science and International Security said Wednesday that satellite imagery from April to June shows there was an increase in activity surrounding a building known to store centrifuges which are used to enrich uranium. This data suggests Pyongyang might be building more centrifuges inside the building to produce weapons-grade plutonium and enriched uranium for its nuclear weapons program. The institute did add, though, that it wasn't sure whether the construction of the centrifuges had been completed. Talks about extending the transfer of Washington's wartime operational control over the South Korean military have been ongoing for months, but Seoul and Washington may be nearing a conclusion to delay the transfer another 5 years to the year 2020. Here's our Yoo Li-an.
Talks on transferring the wartime operational control of South Korean forces from Washington to Seoul are underway, and it looks like the transfer will be delayed by 5 years to 2020. Delegations led by Korea's Deputy Defense Minister Ryu Jae-seung and U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for East Asia David Helvey are currently in Washington to discuss the appropriate timing. Sources there say they agree South Korea's military needs more time to bolster its defense and other capabilities to counter threats posed by North Korea. This meeting is crucial as it could be the last round of talks before the two allies announce their agreement at their annual defense ministerial meeting in Washington in October. The U.S. took control of South Korean forces during the Korean War back in the early 1950s. Peacetime control was returned in 1994, and the South Korean military is set to achieve full autonomy next year if it takes over wartime operational control as previously scheduled. But following Pyongyang's third nuclear test in February last year, Seoul had asked Washington to delay the transfer. South Korea's defense minister Han Min-gu has also been pointing to the changing circumstances behind Seoul's request, emphasizing that North Korea has been carrying out realistic drills since Kim Jong-un took power in 2012. Yurian, ARIRANG News.
Following last week's meeting, the White House is said to be planning a second round of talks with the Korean victims of Japan's wartime sexual slavery. Sources close to the meeting said Paulette Aniskoff, the director of the Office of Public Engagement at the White House, expressed her intention to invite two of the victims, Lee Ok-sun and Kang Il-chul, back to the executive office sometime next month. Aniskoff is known to have shown strong sympathy to the women while listening to their harrowing wartime experiences. The sources say the follow-up meeting, if confirmed, is expected to involve not only U.S. officials from civil social affairs, but also those handling foreign and security policies. The White House's National Security Council, however, says it's not aware of any future meetings. And moving on to the latest on the Ebola outbreak, the virus is now feared to have spread to the Middle East with the death of a 40-year-old Saudi man under observation for an Ebola infection. He died at a hospital in Jeddah Wednesday after returning from a business trip to Sierra Leone. His samples have been submitted to U.S. and German labs for testing. Now, meanwhile, new figures released by the WHO show in the period between Saturday and Monday, there were 108 new cases of Ebola and 45 additional deaths in Guinea, Liberia, Nigeria, and Sierra Leone, pulling up the death toll to 932. Liberia's president has declared a state of emergency. Appearing on national television late Wednesday local time, she said some civil rights may need to be suspended in order to get a handle on the outbreak. And to the ongoing conflict in Gaza, the 72-hour ceasefire is holding for a second day while officials from Israel and Palestine are engaged in indirect talks to reach a longer-term truce. The negotiations are taking place in Cairo with Egyptian officials as mediators. Hamas says there's no deal or understanding on an Israeli proposed truce extension as the indirect talks are ongoing. Palestinians are calling for an end to Israel and Egypt's blockade of the Gaza Strip. Speaking for the first time since truce started, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Wednesday blamed the high civilian death toll in the conflict on Hamas, which he said had used residents as human shields. Meanwhile, the United Nations says more than 500,000 Gaza residents have been displaced in the battered enclave. That's about a third of the territory's inhabitants. And many people around the globe have been shocked by the scenes of Palestinian civilians, including children, being killed or injured amid this month-long conflict. Mass demonstrations have been held in many parts of the world, and that includes Seoul. Our Shin Se-min takes us to one of the rallies.
Free, free Palestine! Free, free Gaza! Save, save Palestine!
These are new chants that ring through central Seoul recently.
Pro-Palestinian activists are voicing their anger at what they believe is an unreasonable force being used by Israel in Gaza.
Organized by members of a Palestinian solidarity group and a non-profit organization called Nanum Munhwa, the activists plan another street protest on Friday to mark 1 month of the outbreak of violence in Gaza that has killed more than 1,800 people, most of them Palestinian. David Levy, the deputy chief of mission at the Israeli embassy in Seoul, expressed regret over the loss of innocent lives on both the Israel and Palestinian sides, but said the war isn't against the Palestinians, but rather against Hamas.
No country can accept missile fire aimed at civilians, and Israel has the right to defend itself and protect its citizens. And we are doing whatever we can when targeting Hamas to prevent any damage to non-involved civilians in Gaza.
Despite international efforts to bring about a peaceful resolution to the crisis, protesters in Seoul aren't optimistic.
We are not expecting anything from the world, really. The world is just, the politicians are wasting time and others are selling guns. They are taking a chance for business.
The outrage was also directed at the South Korean government for selling arms to Israel. Amnesty International says arms trading between the two over the last 5 years has amounted to more than $20 million. The Korean government has yet to make an official statement on the matter. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Meanwhile, Russia is closing its food market to countries that imposed sanctions on Moscow amid continuing global sparring over Ukraine. Experts say it could have substantial impact on European farmers in particular, as Russia is their biggest buyer of agricultural products. Kwon So-ha has the details.
Responding to the tougher economic sanctions recently imposed on Russia by the EU and the US, Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered a one-year ban of agricultural produce, food and vegetable imports on nations that have imposed sanctions against Russia. The government has been ordered to come up with a specific list of goods. Russia's move will have a big impact on Western exporters, as Russia imports nearly a third of its fruit products from the EU, and the US is its second biggest poultry importer. In an attempt to lessen the impact on domestic consumers, Russian authorities say they're looking for alternative partners. Talks with Argentina, Ecuador, and Brazil are already scheduled for this week. Earlier, Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev reportedly said Moscow was considering banning European airlines from flying to Asia over Siberia. The sanctions against Russia began with Russia's annexation of Crimea in March, but were strengthened last week, now targeting Russia's defense, financial, and oil sectors. This came in response to Russia's continuous support for pro-Moscow separatists in Ukraine.
We don't know yet whether sanctions are working. Sanctions are working as intended in putting enormous pressure and strain on the Russian economy. If you look at projections for Russian growth, what you're seeing is that the economy has ground to a halt.
Meanwhile, there are concerns Russia could be planning an invasion, as Moscow is believed to have massed some 20,000 combat-ready troops at its border with Ukraine. NATO says Moscow could go in on the pretext of a humanitarian or peacekeeping mission as Kiev gains ground on separatist-held territory. Kwon So-ha, ARIRANG News.
In the year 2012 for Korea was at its record high.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Na Hyung-kyung live from Seoul.
Shopping market thinks the true meaning of creation shines through. Now, there are multiple factors that caused April's ferry accident to turn into a national disaster. Chief among them was corruption. More than 40 officials will soon get their day in court on charges of overlooking safety concerns in exchange for money and other personal interests. Connie Kim has the details.
43 officials linked to corrupt activities surrounding the operations of the sunken Seoul ferry have been indicted. Corruption in the marine transport industry has been identified as one of the main causes of the sinking that left more than 300 people dead or missing in April. A special investigation team at the Incheon District Prosecutor's Office says it has indicted officials from the Korea Shipping Association, the Oceans Ministry, the now-defunct Coast Guard, and the Korea Ship Safety Technology Authority. 18 have been arrested and 25 have been charged without detention. Charges against those arrested included the embezzlement of public funds for personal use, giving permission for the ship to operate without regular safety checks, and overlooking illegal acts. An official from the Korea Shipping Association also allegedly ordered those under him to permit the ferry operator to allow more passengers on board than were legally allowed. Other charges among officials who were not arrested included faking a shipping accident for insurance purposes. The prosecution is also calling for the establishment of institutions separate from Korea Shipping Association. It says the agency shouldn't have sole authority over shipping operation. After prosecutors wrap up their investigation into the cause of the sinking and corrupt management within the Korea Shipping Association, it will continue its probe into whether the Korea Shipowners Association lobbied politicians regarding the ferry disaster. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
The recent bullying scandals inside the Korean military have been sending shockwaves nationwide. In light of this development, an opposition lawmaker dug up some data. Main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy lawmaker Seo Young-kil says there were 7,530 alleged offenses sent to the military prosecution last year. That's more than an 8% increase from the year before and the highest number since 2009. Now, offenses include physical beatings, sexual assaults, and other criminal cases. We're now living in the era of wearable technology. Shipments of wearable devices are expected to top 19 million this year, and while they provoke curiosity and add an extra convenience to our lives, they also come with privacy concerns. Our Kim Min-ji tells us more.
The explosive growth of wearable devices has also brought with it privacy concerns. According to a new report by Korea's National Information Society Agency, there are mounting fears of misuse or abuse of information, as wearable devices are able to collect a variety of personal information regardless of place or time. Front and center is Google Glass, which can record everything in view and share it in an instant. The product's facial recognition app named Tag is also raising alarms, as the user can get their hands on personal information, including a person's name and their photos on social media, just by taking a photo of them. A U.S. senator has already called on Google to come up with measures so that the application only identifies people who have given the permission to do so. Other countries are also stepping up efforts to protect personal information. The British Data Protection Act prohibits the use of personal information attained through wearable devices for advertisement or business purposes. Australia also offers detailed guidelines when it comes to privacy invasion through the use of digital devices. Korea, on the other hand, has a lot of ground to make up. Wearable devices do not fall into the category of network cameras or image information processing devices, so relevant laws do not forbid their use. And to be punished by the current information network law, videos must contain pornography or violate privacy or portrait rights. The Korean agency's report points that there needs to be basic standards that can be applied to wearable devices. The Korea Communications Commission acknowledges there is a cause for concern and plans to review relevant laws and regulations. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
And to some health news, a new study out of the UK says an aspirin a day could keep cancer away. Researchers at the Queen Mary University of London says that taking an aspirin every day can reduce the risk of developing or dying from bowel or stomach cancers by about 30 to 40%. The results are from 200 studies looking at the pros and cons of taking aspirin. The scientists say the benefits of aspirin will only show after people between the ages of 50 to 65 take a daily dose of 75 to 100 milligrams for at least 5 to 10 years. Researchers, however, warn that taking aspirin long-term can increase the risk of negative side effects like bleeding in the stomach. Whether it be on the canvas or on the stage, some people were just meant to be artists and display their talents in a number of fields. Our Im Yoon-hee joins me today to talk more about this issue. So who are we talking about here?
We are talking about Cho Young-nam, so a very legendary figure here in Korea. So he's known for his various different artistic contributions, and he recently opened an art exhibition titled Wangta, and that's a Korean term referring to the idea of being left out or outcast. So take a look.
He's a legendary singer, an iconic face in the industry. But he also is a well-showcased artist, with plenty of works to share. From the old to the very young, most everyone on the peninsula knows Cho Young-nam and his eccentric character. He has fans as both a legendary singer, but also as an established artist. And with so many people around him, the phrase left out doesn't really come to mind. But Cho Young-nam feels otherwise.
The reason I called it left out is because contemporary art is considered left out or outcast. The general public doesn't really like contemporary art. Even to me, it can be so confusing. If someone wants to do contemporary art, the person could be an outcast or they can outcast others. Since I'm a singer and an artist, I sometimes feel left out as well, so I use that idea for this exhibition.
His creations are inspired by objects of art, and they reflect the various influences throughout his life. Everything from collaborations with foreign artists to a different kind of floral bouquet. Cho Young-nam shows his creativity isn't limited. But throughout his works, one thing is consistent, and that's his trademark hwatu, one of Korea's favorite playing cards. It's a flurry of nostalgic images, along with other flashbacks in not only his life, but in Korea's history as well. And within his works is a sense of the playful humor he finds in situations, like this newly dating couple, set against the backdrop of a traditional Korean board game of baduk. But Cho shows another side to his art, a more serious aspect, in a collection that comes with a sense of patriotism, along with a heavy message, hoping for the union of a torn country.
In my opinion, the red and blue colours are a bit tacky and childish, so I pulled all the colours out, and now it's very elegant looking. Why the rip? It reflects our torn country's history and the separated state of Korea.
Cho Young-nam is not new to the world of art exhibitions. But he does differentiate himself, once again, with an art and talk show, where he interacts with the audience on a very personal level. It's hard to be humble when you're so capable of such different mediums in art. And Cho Young-nam is well aware of his brilliance, as well as the legacy he leaves behind.
You should call me. You are the father of the Korean contemporary art.
Korean contemporary art.
Yes, you should say.
I will claim that.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Korean contemporary art.
All right, we should say. So what was it like meeting him in person? Tell me something that you couldn't say maybe in the report.
Right, so I mentioned earlier he's an eccentric character, a lot of fun. So I actually was very fortunate to get a tour, of his exhibition and have him explain each piece. And so that was really neat because he did have a story to tell behind each piece, because he really does want to share his personal story, and how it ties into Korea's culture and Korea's history. But what's really neat was that what I think is very interesting is he says he's, outcast by the art community, but I think it's quite the contrary. He really does want to be, a part of this art community, and he really does have a lot to offer, especially to the younger artists as well.
So did he explain a little bit more about why he uses hwatu? I mean, that's what made him popular in the first place.
Right, so his trademark sign, he became very well known for that, and that's an interesting story as well. So he said with other Korean artists, they really went towards more traditional Korean images, such as, the countryside or such as the Hanok village, but he wanted to pick something different, something that made him stand out, but really gave him, a definition and made him who he is, but something that's also very embedded into Korean culture. And that's exactly where hwatu comes in.
And you did say that he is perhaps a huge inspiration to other younger artists. He's continuing that work as well?
Right, yeah. He's very into contributing to the society as well. So he's actually donating part of the proceeds from this exhibition to supply art supplies to those in the rural area. So he really wants to make art accessible for everybody, whether you be in the countryside or whether you be in the city. So he wants to encourage people to, explore their artistic, their creative sides, and to really be themselves.
So not just youngsters, but also anybody who wants to be an artist, basically. All right, thank you very much, Uni, for the story today.
Always a pleasure.
Good afternoon. Today is known as Ipchu here in Korea, which according to the traditional solar calendar is the first day of autumn. It's also the last of 3 hottest days of the year, 말복. But readings in most areas are expected to hover below 30 degrees Celsius under lots of clouds, and rain will get sprinkles here in Seoul, but the East Coast areas will see showers up to 60 millimeters during that day, and the daytime high here in Seoul, Daegu, and Busan will rise to 29, while Gwangju will hit 30 this afternoon. And for other regions, it looks like Jeju Island and Daejeon will top out at 30 and 27, and Dokdo should top out at 24 this afternoon. And for Typhoon Halong, it continues to move in a northeasterly wind direction heading to mainland Japan. So Jeju and the southern and eastern coast of Korea will be indirectly affected by Halong over the weekend. So please do keep that in mind. Well, that's all for me today, and have a wonderful rest of the day.
All right, thank you, Ji-hyun, for those updates. And that's all we have for now. Join me again for more updates at 4 p.m. Korea time.